Star Trek has always used its sci-fi fantasy premise as a vehicle for social commentary. That's a fundamental part of what Star Trek is. Like other TV writers of his generation, most notably Rod Serling, Gene Roddenberry knew he could use his show to promote tolerance, equality, and other progressive social and political values by wrapping his messages in allegory. Much of Star Trek's progressive political content is present in the form of passive representation. The crew of the Starship Enterprise consists of people of many races and nationalities, of men and women, all living and working together in harmony, not oblivious to their differences, but aware that those differences and the diversity of their group is a strength. The show doesn't usually beat the audience over the head with its multiculturalism, but simply presents it as a normal and positive thing. Sometimes, though, the messaging is more pointed. In the episode Balance of Terror, a crew member views Spock with suspicion after it's revealed that the enemies of the episode, the Romulans, appear to be identical to Spock's own people, the Vulcans. At one point, Captain Kirk tells this crew member, whose name is Styles, to, quote, leave any bigotry in your quarters. In the episode Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, the Enterprise encounters two men, Beale and Lokai, from a planet of half-white, half-black people with a violent racist hatred for one another. Their racial differences are so slight that Captain Kirk doesn't even notice at first. Then Beale explains, I'm black on the right side. Lokai is white on the right side. I didn't say the allegory was subtle. Star Trek's dedication to dramatizing the danger and irrationality of racial prejudice continued into the 1980s with the premiere of Star Trek The Next Generation. In the episode The Measure of a Man, android Enterprise crew member Data is the subject of a hearing to decide if he is entitled to legal recognition as a person and the equal rights and protection under the law that go along with it. His situation is explicitly compared to slavery at one point. For the first 30 years of its existence, Star Trek took the opportunity to speak out against racial prejudice and other forms of bigotry and intolerance on numerous occasions, but always through allegory. The characters experiencing discrimination, being scapegoated or oppressed, were aliens or artificial life forms or some other variety of stand-in for actual people. So were those imposing that discrimination and oppression and benefiting from it. Then, midway through its sixth season, the second Star Trek spin-off series, Deep Space Nine, did something that no Star Trek show had ever done before. It produced an episode that dealt with racism directly and literally. No allegory, no metaphor, no separation. The title of that episode is Far Beyond the Stars. In the episode, Captain Ben Sisko suddenly finds himself living the life of a man on 1950s Earth, Benny Russell, a science fiction writer in New York City. Benny shows up for work at the office of Incredible Tales magazine and is assigned to write a story based on a familiar-looking illustration of a space station. He goes home that night and comes up with a story he's especially proud of, a story that sounds a lot like the premise of the series we're watching, the story of a diverse group of humans and aliens living and working aboard a space station led by a commander who happens to be a black man. All of Benny's fellow writers love the story, his editor likes it too, but there's just one problem. There's no way they can publish it. It's the Negro captain, the editor explains in the parlance of the time. People won't accept it, newsstands won't carry it, and if they do, it could cause a race riot. Benny is told to rewrite the story to make the lead character white, or else the story will never see the light of day. Frustrated, depressed, Benny considers abandoning writing altogether and taking up his fiancée Cassie on her offer to join her in buying the coffee shop where she works. But after an encounter with a street preacher who urges him to write the words, Benny goes home and writes another story about his black space station commander. When we next see Benny at the magazine office, he has written a total of 6 additional stories about his black space station commander. Benny's editor is flabbergasted. You wrote 6 sequels to a story I told you I couldn't publish in the first place? Have you lost your mind? Benny confesses he's asked himself the same question lately, but he stands behind his stories and his intentions in writing them. Benny has experienced firsthand the racism Black Americans have to live with on a constant basis, the disrespect, the suspicion, the ever-present threat of violence from white people. He wants to write stories for people like him, stories that promise a brighter future, stories that offer hope. Benny's colleagues are on his side and try to persuade the editor to change his mind. It's no use until one of them suggests framing the story as a dream, the product of a black person in the 1950s imagining a better world to come. The editor accepts the compromise and agrees to publish the story with the new dream ending. Benny is ecstatic, but his happiness is short-lived. That night, while out to celebrate with Cassie, Benny sees a friend of his, a street hustler named Jimmy, dead in the street, shot by a pair of racist cops Benny has encountered before. When Benny protests their murder of his friend, the cops knock Benny to the ground and brutally beat him. Some weeks later, after taking time to recover, Benny, still showing the effects of the beating, returns to the magazine office on the day his story is set to be published. His co-workers are glad to see him, but when the editor arrives, it's with bad news. There will be no edition of Incredible Tales this month. After reviewing the issue, the publisher has decided not to release it. Apparently, the publisher felt the issue did not meet their usual high standards. And that's not the only bad news. The publisher has also ordered the editor to fire Benny from the writing staff. Benny breaks down, declaring through angry tears that destroying his story will not destroy the idea it represents, that the people and the future he created are real and cannot be denied. He collapses and is taken away in an ambulance. The street preacher who encouraged him to write the story rides along and tells him, "Rest easy, brother Benny. Don't you know who you are? You are the dreamer and the dream." Captain Sisko awakens in the infirmary, back aboard Deep Space Nine, back in his own life. In the final scene, he talks with his father, who has come for a visit from Earth. Joseph Sisko asks his son about his unusual experience, his dream, and Ben says, "I wonder, what if it wasn't a dream? Maybe Benny isn't the dream, maybe we are. Maybe, somewhere far beyond all those distant stars, Benny Russell is dreaming of us." Immediately upon its original broadcast in February 1998, Far Beyond the Stars was recognized as one of Deep Space Nine's best episodes. Since then, it's been the subject of academic papers and college courses examining its portrayal of racism and the parallels between its story and the real-life experiences of black science fiction writers, and has been widely accepted as one of the finest episodes of any Star Trek series ever. Much of that analysis and praise makes note of how unusually frank its handling of the issue of racism is, especially for a science fiction show. That aspect of the episode certainly deserves to be applauded, but for me, the greatness of the episode goes beyond that. Far Beyond the Stars, written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler from a story by Mark Scott Zicree and directed by series star Avery Brooks, finds a way to depict the racism faced by people of color, particularly black people, without masking it behind an analogy, but also without jettisoning the sci-fi conceit of the series. Much of the power of Far Beyond the Stars comes from how its creators are able to use the sci-fi fantasy concepts of Star Trek to lay bare the reality of racial bigotry. The episode plays at times like a socially conscious inversion of The Wizard of Oz. Unlike Dorothy, who is carried from her mundane life on a Kansas farm into a realm of magic and adventure, Ben Sisko finds himself pulled out of his life as the commander of a space station in a far-flung corner of the galaxy into the comparatively ordinary life of a mid-20th century writer who can only dream of such things. The episode borrows another conceit from The Wizard of Oz, specifically the 1939 film. All the major players in Benny Russell's life in 1950s New York City are counterparts of Ben Sisko's friends and enemies on Deep Space Nine. When Sisko awakens in the infirmary at the end, he doesn't look around at Jake, Cassidy, his father, and Dr. Bashir and say, "You were there, and you were there, and you," but he could. The use of counterparts isn't just a clever way to incorporate the regular cast into the episode, although it is that, and it yields some enjoyable moments, like Armin Shimmerman's writer character being the righteously indignant exact opposite of Quark, and Colm Meaney getting to play a humble but creative author of stories about robots. The story places the various cast members with clear intention in ways that serve to reinforce the message of the episode and the harm caused by racial discrimination. All Star Trek casts can boast of racial diversity. It's baked into the premise of the franchise. Part of Star Trek's DNA is to show us a group of heroes who are not just white men, but men and women, and recently, finally, non-binary people as well, of many different colors and national origins and cultural backgrounds. Deep Space Nine's cast is no exception to this rule. In fact, it's exceptional for how diverse its cast of regulars and recurring players is, even compared to other Star Trek shows. Deep Space Nine features more black actors in important regular or recurring roles than any other Trek series. Far Beyond the Stars allows the show's black stars to take center stage for much of its runtime. Not only Avery Brooks as Captain Sisko/Benny, but Penny Johnson as Cassidy and Cassie, Cirroc Lofton as Jake and Jimmy, Brock Peters as Joseph Sisko and the Preacher, and Michael Dorn as Worf and Willie, the star outfielder for the New York Giants. But without going out of their way to draw attention to it, the creators of the episode also show us one of the most fundamental ways in which the United States of the 1950s differs from the United Federation of Planets in the 24th century. On Deep Space Nine, the black characters and alien characters portrayed by black actors live and work side by side with white people and those of all other races. In the world of Far Beyond the Stars, however, the black characters and the white characters interact almost exclusively within their own racial groups. This segregation is maintained without comment, and nearly without exception, only Benny Russell is seen to regularly pass between the two communities. At work, he goes to the office where he is the only black person, and on his off hours, he returns home to the black community where he is surrounded by people who look like him. And Benny is made to suffer for this crossing of the racial boundary. His first run-in with the racist cops, played by Mark Alaimo and Jeffrey Combs, is a result of the cops believing that Benny, who is just leaving work at the magazine office, is somewhere he doesn't belong. This stark and violently defended separation between people of different races is unthinkable to the human residents of Deep Space Nine. It's totally outside their experience. Because in their era, Earth society has long since outgrown such things, at least when it comes to how humans relate to each other. But it's something that Benny Russell and the other black characters have to live with every day. Willie refers to it in reply to Cassie teasing him about still living uptown in majority black Harlem when a baseball star like him can live wherever he wants. The hell I can, Willie says. They can hardly get used to the idea of me playing alongside them. Living next to them? That's a whole other story. The casting of Alaimo and Combs, who normally play Gul Dukat and Weyoun as the racist cops, sends an unmistakable message too. And it's a message that runs both ways. Yes, the racist cops who assault Benny and murder Jimmy appear in the likenesses of Dukat and Weyoun because they are the bad guys. But the episode is also telling us that the interplanetary fascism of the Cardassian Empire and the Dominion, which Dukat and Weyoun serve, is just the 24th century equivalent of the white supremacist state violence being perpetrated by the cops. The creators aren't just using Dukat and Weyoun to show us what this episode is about. They're using these racist cops to show us that this is what the entire series has been about. The murder of Jimmy by the cops and the beating Benny endures afterward are the culmination of the racist violence seen in the episode, but Far Beyond the Stars also depicts the smaller, less obvious results of the racial segregation under which these characters live. The first scene, set at the magazine office, ends with the editor announcing that since their readers have expressed curiosity as to what the writers look like, the next issue will include photos of each member of the staff. Except for Kay, who, in a nod to legendary Star Trek writer Dorothy D.C. Fontana, publishes under her initials to hide the fact that she's a woman, and for Benny, whose identity as a black man is also concealed from the public. Just a quick aside, I appreciate that while the focus of the episode is on depicting racism, it also makes time to point out the discrimination faced by women. Misogyny and racism are variations of the same basic thing. Oppression based on characteristics that ought to be regarded as morally neutral but have been arbitrarily declared inferior or undesirable. Patriarchy has coexisted alongside white supremacy for a very, very long time. Anyway, Benny voices a mild objection to being asked to skip photo day. He points out that black writers are not exactly unheard of. W.E.B. Du Bois, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright. The editor shrugs those off as authors of literature for liberal intellectuals. The readers of Incredible Tales are of more common stock, and many of them probably wouldn't be willing to pay for science fiction stories written by a black man. The editor apologizes to Benny, tells him, "I wish things were different, but they're not." To which Benny calmly replies, "Wishing never changed a damn thing." It's not just the violence and the threat of violence that makes living under a racist system so brutal. It's the comparatively minor indignities like being told to skip photo day so your magazine can continue to pretend to readers that you're a white person, or being forbidden from writing stories with black protagonists because that's not what white people would want to read about. It's the thousands of little things. Things people like me, privileged people, white people, particularly white men, might dismiss as trivial. Those are the things that irritate, that exhaust, that grind down even those fortunate enough never to experience that violence firsthand. In fact, the episode argues that those little things may even be worse than the outbursts of violence in the long run. The murder of Jimmy and the assault of Benny are both horrific, inexcusable, dehumanizing acts of brutality, but neither of them is the last straw for Benny. He hangs in there after those events. He recovers. He returns to work. He is bruised, but unbroken. Benny doesn't break until he comes into the office and learns that his story will not be published after all, that the owner has decided to pull the entire issue rather than distribute a magazine containing a story about a black science fiction hero, and that he has been fired. That's the last straw. That's what pushes Benny to proclaim, "I am a human being, damn it." That's the moment when he's forced to confront the fact that as long as things are the way they are, nothing he does will be good enough. He's submitted to degradation, the concealing of his race from his audience. He's compromised with his editor, rewritten his story about a black space station commander to make it a dream, make it a fiction within a fiction, just to render it as harmless and inoffensive as possible to any white readers who might feel threatened by the mere suggestion of a future where black people are on equal footing with white people. He's even been patient and polite with the racist cops, showing him flagrant disrespect, the same racist cops who later shot his friend down in the street. He's done all of that and more, and it's not good enough. It will never be good enough. I think that was the hope Benny was clinging to, that despite it all, if he held his tongue and kept his head down and showed he was willing to compromise, that eventually he would be able to thread the needle and find a way to survive that also allowed him to remain true enough to himself to be happy and proud of who he was. When that hope was taken away, he snapped. Captain Sisko emerges from the experience, realizing that he is the embodiment of the hope Benny Russell held to so desperately. At the start of the episode, Sisko is at his low point. Despite recent advances, the war between the Federation and the Dominion continues with no end in sight. Starfleet is still losing ships. People Sisko has known for years are still dying. When his father arrives for his visit, Sisko tells him, "Every time I achieve a real victory, something happens that seems to turn everything to ashes." That sounds familiar. Sisko shares with his father that he's thinking about stepping down, resigning his commission, and letting someone else assume his responsibilities. At the end of the episode, after living a bit of Benny Russell's life, Sisko resolves to stay put, to finish the job he started. Why does he do that? Because he's experienced the life of a black man in the United States in the 1950s and realized that the obstacles he faces are nothing compared to that? The prophets gave Sisko the vision as a way of saying, "Suck it up, man, at least you don't have it that bad"? I don't think so. Remember, part of what the episode shows us is that Sisko and Benny Russell are the same. Not just the same person, but in the same predicament, albeit with differing details. Sisko doesn't end the episode determined to fight on because he's realized things could be worse. He draws inspiration from Benny. Sisko tells his father, "I'm going to do the only thing I can do. Stay here and finish the job I started. And if I fail, And his father picks it up from there, adding, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith," which is a quote from the New Testament, the second epistle to Timothy. Sisko's newfound determination doesn't come from seeing how much worse Benny's fight is than his own, but from having lived through Benny's fight and realized that it's all the same fight. Benny does what he needs to do in order to survive in a world that has been engineered to crush him. He absorbs the dehumanization and harassment he's bombarded with every day, but he insists on going through life as the person he is. Cassie gives him the option to quit the magazine and help her run a coffee shop instead, but he doesn't do it because he's not a restaurateur. He's a writer. His editor, after refusing his story about the black space station commander, offers him the opportunity to write a novella that could be the cover story of an upcoming issue. Instead, Benny writes 6 more adventures of Captain Sisko. He's a black man, and he wants to write about black heroes. He suffers for it, he is beaten and broken for it, but Benny Russell refuses to go through life as anyone but himself. Ben Sisko realizes that he can do no less. In the ambulance, the preacher, the counterpart to Joseph Sisko, Ben's father, tells Benny, "You are the dreamer and the dream. They are one, and so is their struggle. The struggle changes, but it never ends." When the word dream is invoked in the context of the struggle for civil rights, the struggle against racist injustice, the most immediate connection most of us make is to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who in 1963 spoke of his hope that one day people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, and forever etched his dream into our popular consciousness. Avery Brooks is a thoughtful man and an intelligent and self-aware actor. Surely it must have occurred to him while acting in this episode and directing it that he too was the dreamer and the dream. He was a black man living in what was then and is still a deeply prejudiced and inequitable society, transcending the limitations placed on people like him to star in a popular and critically acclaimed TV series where he portrayed another black man who was the product of a society that had overcome that prejudice and inequity and launched itself out into the universe. With a bit of empathy and imagination, any one of us, even white dipshits like yours truly, can at least have some faint sense of what it feels like. Standing here in the United States in the year 2024, I can acknowledge the advancements we've made since the 1950s. I can also recognize that the mountain we have still to climb before we reach the promised land may be even higher, steeper, and more treacherous than Dr. King imagined. Progress is a means, not an end. To look back and see how far we've come and look ahead to see how far we've yet to go is to know what it means to be the dreamer in the dream. I'm telling you, this Star Trek shit, sometimes it's pretty good.